It's widely known I'm a huge IWC fan, and today's episode is one I've looked forward to for years at this point, as it hosts Grainger Herr, IWC's Chief Executive Officer since 2017. I was fortunate enough to cross paths with Chris back in April when I was a guest of the brand at the Goodwood members event. After being introduced, we shared some time chatting cars while eating hamburgers and watching vintage race cars lap the track. Pretty surreal, to be quite honest. An architect and interior designer by trade, Chris and I chat about his ascension within the company, having started in marketing only to begin designing stores. We discuss his relationship with Toto Wolff, his most worn watch, and of course, his grail car. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age Podcast.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
I've really been looking forward to this conversation, quite frankly, for years at this point.
Expectations I won't be able to live up to.
No, you should. No, you would. I mean, obviously, I think we sort of began some of these conversations at Goodwood, which I really enjoyed. So thank you so much for the hospitality, first and foremost, over there, as a guest of Grant. And obviously, what more can you say really about Goodwood, frankly? What a venue, what an event. The members, that was my first time ever to Goodwood, period, let alone the members event. So you've been a lot there, I would anticipate. What?
It's been probably over 10 years now. I think we started in 2013 or thereabouts. I didn't get to go in the beginning, but then obviously in the last few years, yes, it's been several times a year, track days, events, client hospitality, offsite meetings, members meetings, Spitfire takeoff, Spitfire landing, complex, all that stuff. It's truly unique that this is basically, when you think about a lot of the historic sporting estates in the UK, clearly are now either museums or are turned into theme parks. A lot of the Chesington, Alton Towers, all the rest of it, they're all based around these kind of manor houses. And either it's gone into National Trust property over the years and tends to be like a kind of a parkland and house to visit kind of day out venue, or most of the others are all turned into some sort of leisure park or Bewley Motor Museum, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And for the Duke to have an estate like Goodwood still actually operating as, a Duke's estate today is just, there's nothing else like it, right? And to keep that going, which was put into sharp relief during COVID when we visited, and it was just so unreal to see that, it's like 750 staff just for the upkeep. Right. And during a period like COVID with no visitors and all of the events being cancelled and everything being based on ticket sales, it's hugely challenging. And the operating costs for these old houses that don't tend to be insulated, don't tend to have modern installation in terms of electrical, aircon, and so on. It's a huge maintenance issue all of the time. So you really need that machine of golfing, horse racing, doggy events, racing events, flight operations, all of that needs to run all of the time for an estate like that to be viable, right? In the absence of just pouring royal amounts of money into it.
Right. Quite literally.
It's not easy to make them work commercially. So I really respect Charles for what he's done over the years, built that huge name for Goodwood and keeps everybody, including the best cars in the world when it comes to historic racing. He can get things to Goodwood that I only know one other place that can get cars of that magnitude into one location. That's the Peterson Museum in LA. That's the only other place that can do it.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of those cars are running, whereas at the Peterson, they're still, So
yeah, they have a good selection always in good running order. So yes, they're still Peterson, but when you look at their clout to get really top end automotive into one place and assemble things that have never been together. That's something that Charles does in Goodwood, when he says, okay, let's get all the GT3s out, let's get all of the McLaren long tails out. Let's get historic Porsche V10, V12 race cars out. Things that have never actually been together in that full constellation. He's always amazing at bringing those collections together that you wouldn't see like that in any other place. So.
Yeah, sure. What's sort of your earliest car memory, and or like what got you into cars in general?
My earliest car memory is probably I had sort of a lady that looked after me some of the time because my mum was studying law when I was really little. So I actually did most of the law degree age 2 to 6, probably thereabouts before school. I did all the library sessions, did a lot of lectures, did a lot of the but then this lady looked after me once in a while. And she lived on a really busy through road in the town where we used to live. And I used to stand at the fence for hours on end, at a garden fence, just trying to sort of make out the car makes as early as possible of cars coming up the hill.
Right.
I did that for hours on end and just name all the car brands. That's probably my earliest car memory, to be honest.
Did you have a favorite at that early age? Like, was there a particular, I don't know, silhouette or brand for that matter?
Yeah, I think it came a little bit later. I don't think I was that conscious of cars that I particularly, because I was really, really little. So
Yeah.
the first sort of desirability thing that I remember was clearly in primary school. My mum's best friend, basically, it was my dad sold his father's house, which was a couple of doors down the road from where we lived.
Oh, cool.
A Scottish couple moved in there with their kids, and we all became best friends. And it really sort of started like they were random buyers of this house, but ended up being mum's best friend, basically.
Sure.
And the mum, she had a Peugeot 205 GTI, sort of 80s,
Yeah.
black with a red pinstripe and all of that. And that was sort of the same time when the Renault 5 F1 and all of that was about, and you had those like crazy rally inspired street versions of these cars.
Yeah, totally.
Time when probably Jean Todt was running Peugeot rally efforts with the 205 sort of mid engined. And, that was the first car that I found incredibly cool. It went like Sting, and my mum's friend didn't hold back with us in the back, which was cool. And she got us to school in incredibly short amounts of time, which was and I think that was probably my first time when I thought, yeah, that's a cool car.
Oh, that's amazing. What's your daily driver typically?
Well, it's I'm obviously married to AMG these days.
Yeah.
It's been a long line of AMGs. At the moment, I'm in the CLE 53 six-cylinder CLE, which is currently the biggest petrol engine version that exists in the sort of the compact AMGs. The V8 flat crank plane is coming back in a couple of years' time. It's all been announced, but while we're waiting for that, I'm enjoying the CLE 53.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Obviously, you mentioned AMG Petronas, basically, the F1 team. You guys have been, I don't know, an advertiser / partner, I guess, for that team for as long as I can remember almost. What do you remember? What year did you guys enter that relationship?
So when you look at the AMG partnership, that was announced in 2005.
Okay, yeah.
Started with the Engineer AMG collection in 2005, back in the previous generation design. So we worked with that AMG side of things ever since. And then the Formula One team was added in 2013.
Okay.
It was just at the changeover between Michael Schumacher and Lewis. And Lewis, obviously, Michael having the tragic skiing accident and finishing his career at Mercedes, and then Lewis coming in 2013. I still remember at Watches and Wonders in 2013, we had built like an entire Formula One garage setup with a sort of a pit lane and a wind tunnel effect and all the rest of it. And I had the floor stickers already down as Michael Schumacher and Nico Rosberg. And we got the phone call and saying, okay, Lewis Hamilton's been signed. And, we had to reprint all the stickers and get Lewis' name and
oh, wow,
on the floor and, peel off the German flag and Michael Schumacher's name. So that was just that changeover period. So that's been over 10 years now, or 12 years now with the Formula One team. And obviously, clearly the most amazing period for Mercedes when you had 6 world championships, with Lewis Hamilton, 7 constructors championships in that period, and probably what will go down in history as one of the most successful pairings of a team manager and driver with Toto and Lewis. And it's a sort of a pinch me moment, because I think I never appreciated. I came into Formula One um, relatively sort of fresh when we started that partnership.
Oh, that was my next question.
I've
Yeah.
watched that much Formula One before, because my thing was always more the touring car and rally car side of things.
Okay.
Formula One I hadn't followed intensely at all, so this was really like a new start for me. And obviously, they started winning all of the time
Right.
very soon after we started. So you kind of take it for granted. And then, when I look back now and I look at the photos and I see like all the, season winning races that I happened to be at when, Toto was bringing these trophies home, and Lewis winning, and Nico winning that one year as well.
Yeah, sure.
You kind of in the moment, you kind of just think, oh yeah, that's Formula One, and until it stops, and then you realize what you're missing.
Right, right. Well, I know you're close with Toto Wolff. Was that just a byproduct of you joining? Like, how did that relationship start? Like, did they approach you? Did you approach them? Well, I mean, this was pre you being CEO, right?
Yeah, this happened before my time, and it was really down to the fact that Mercedes was re-entering Formula One as a works team coming out of the Braun
Right.
GP setup.
Okay.
And I think because of the relationship between Mercedes AMG and us, and because of the fact that obviously our chairman used to be on the board of what was Daimler Chrysler back then, there was always like really tight communication between us and the world of Mercedes. And
I see.
I wasn't obviously involved in that back then, but I can only assume that because of that foray into Formula One for Mercedes as a works team, the conversation started. And we started off as an engineering partner. And I think back in the day, I remember us saying, oh, we'll never be on the car, we'll never be on the driver. We're just engineering in the background. And then it all sort of changed over time. And I remember, I think it was 2018 at the Melbourne GP, I put on the very first IWC brand sticker myself onto the first front wing end plate, that started that sort of IWC being part of the livery of the car and going onto the driver. So that was quite a few years later.
Right.
And Toto I met really when I kicked off the relationship in this current role. This would have been 16 or 17 at Barcelona testing. And we just sat down and had a meeting with Valtteri Bottas and sort of a few people of the team. And then I just had a 15-minute conversation with Toto, and we just got on really well. And I think we shared a lot of the, it just clicked straight away. And then I think I was really lucky that Toto has always been a mentor to me ever since. And whenever I have a really sticky problem, he's the one I call.
Yeah, that's incredible.
He's always been taking the time, which is amazing.
I got sort of that impression that maybe he was sort of a mentor, maybe big brother type of status with you. Have there been any other? Sorry.
It's more than big brother, definitely. He's, and I appreciate, he's incredibly busy, and the travel schedule and all the ventures that he's in, is crazy. But it's just one of those things. Like even, on days like when I broke my collarbone, for example, snowboarding, I phoned him that day, and I will never forget the pep talk he gave me, which he should sort of listen to his own advice, which he doesn't. But, it's just, I don't know. It's definitely a father figure type situation now for me, definitely. Oh, wow. And he's always been incredibly gracious with the time he takes and the advice he gives me, and it helps me a lot to, sometimes you just need that other opinion, that voice of reason to tell you, come, just get your act together, do this, do that, and he's great.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, obviously his success and his story has been incredible to sort of learn about and read about. What a guy. You attended Central St. Martin's, which I usually sort of very identify briefly. With. But I sort of course. Okay, so it's just a summer. I usually identify that school with fashion primarily, and I guess they have an architecture program.
Used to, but I did it. I attended Central St. Martin for fashion. So my intention at that time really was to go into women's wear.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's very like Tom Ford of you.
I'm not sure about that. I think that's why I didn't pursue it in the end.
Well, I don't know if you know, he went to he went to school for architecture and ended up studying fashion. Like he didn't even have a portfolio. He just rolled up.
Yeah. So I did it sort of the other way around. I came, I did a lot of, I was really originally into set design and that sort of theme park design, and I did a lot of sort of matte painting kind of stuff in my teenage years. And then I went
Okay.
into sportswear design. I did a ton of mountain bikes. I did interiors for sailing yachts. I did,
Wow.
all the apparel side of things. My thing was always because I was an only child and I had a lot of time on my hands. So I designed a lot of brands, shoe brands, sneakers, sportswear, snowboard wear, bike stuff, whatever happened to interest me at that moment in time. A little bit later on, I really started to do my own sewing and do like fashion bits, for girlfriends at the time, family
Right.
members, and for school. And then my girlfriend at that time, her dad was, he was one of those sort of fashion wholesalers that do the kind of the small fashion boutique labels, where he was kind of sort of the wholesale brand that took care of a bunch of brands that go into department stores and go into small fashion boutiques. And he was
Sure.
always the one that said to me, look, I know you want to go to Oxbridge and become pharmacist. My dream was always to have my own pharmacy and then use the night shifts to actually design, to draw stuff. And he was like, look, if you're into designing, just go and follow your dream, just go and do it. And that's what, really set me off. And at that time, I had already decided, because of my visits to UCL and Imperial and Oxford and Cambridge, I'd already decided to go to the UK. And then it was Central St. Martin's that did the summer foundation program, and that's how I ended up there. And literally, as you say about Tom Ford, like I didn't like the atmosphere in the fashion studios. It seemed very, very cutthroat and very competitive. And then I saw another studio that looked a lot friendlier and it looked a lot more like my kind of vibe. And I asked the tutor, I said, what's that? And he said, oh, that's spatial design, which was basically interior design. And then by the time I'd actually come around to applying for UCAS for university places, they had stopped that course, discontinued the program. And so then my mind was set on interior design. And then I found another uni in the UK. And that's how I ended up at Bournemouth, because they had a tutor and an interior design program I really that spoke to me, and I liked the atmosphere there. And it was a bit sort of weird, convoluted way into the university time. But yeah, Central St. Martin's was an interesting experience for sure.
Oh, wow. So did you, I mean, obviously that's a world renowned school, especially for fashion. Are you friends with anybody that were in fashion then that are like notable now? Okay. Okay.
No, and I do think that, my feeling is that of the 50 odd people that did interior design with me, I think only like a minuscule percentage ended up working in interior design,
Sure.
and probably not for very long either. So I don't know, but I don't know of anybody who's really sort of pursued that. And
Right.
it's sometimes a little bit the system in the UK as well. A lot of people go to university, regardless of whether they're really going to do an academic job in the end or a job based on what they've been studying. So it's just, I think the fallout rate there is quite something.
Yeah. Right. What? Okay. So you mentioned a pharmacy. What did your dad do when you were growing up? Your mom studied law, you said.
Yeah, so my dad was he was a chemical engineer,
Okay.
so he was really into his chemistry and physics,
Mm.
and he worked for a huge pharmaceutical company that used to exist in Germany called Höchst, which was like Bayer, one of those big chemical companies that got all Americanized and broken up. In the end, he ended up basically working in IT within that business, and that
Oh,
got
wow.
taken over. So eventually, through tens of mid 90s acquisitions, he ended up working for Hewlett Packard, even though he never changed his job, which is quite something, from sort of
Wow.
chemicals to basically working on SAP projects within Hewlett Packard. It's like a weird sort
Yeah.
of acquisition after acquisition. So he was the natural sciences type person. My mum was always more creative linguistic. She was an interpreter for English and Spanish. She brought more the artistic side, I would say. And in the beginning, I think it's just started off like any 3-year-old would do. I asked my mum, what sort of job pays a lot of money? And she went, pharmacist. So I set my mind on pharmacy. And
Wow.
it's funny because when I was about 15, I started working for the sort of, the richest local pharmacy in the town where we used to live.
Sure.
And I did a little bit of an internship there, and they worked out after about 2 months that I was a lot better at visual merchandising than at stacking shelves. So they gave me free reign in the end to decorate their windows like with whatever I wanted, which was great for me.
Wow.
Building these, like, it had nothing to do with promoting pharmaceuticals. I took any random topic and just built stuff that I wanted to build, like, planetary solar systems. Like, I remember I built this huge, like, sea storm out of like a ton of cling film and spray paint and Playmobil figures. And, at the end, it was promoting some sort of medicine, but really it was just for me to build this stuff. It's just a
That's incredible. Wow,
I should have known back then that that wasn't going to end up in actual pharmacy, but more on
right. Right.
the side.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's crazy. Well, you started IWC in marketing though, correct?
Yeah, as an architect, basically. So, when I finished university in England, my wife and I, we had tried to work out. She was in tourism, I was in design. We tried to work out what to do. I had an offer to go and work for Zara, the fashion brand, in their store department, like in the store design department, which would have been in Spain.
In Spain, yeah.
And the other offer, I always thought, like, the other two places that I liked for architecture was really the Netherlands or Switzerland. And I always
Sure.
had this connection to Switzerland because of my grandparents living there and, us having the holiday homes there. So it was always an option in my mind. And obviously with architects like Peter Zumthor and Herzog Dömeron who influenced me a lot,
Hmm.
it was one of the places I wanted to come. So I got an offer in the end from the Arts College in Basel to do the BA undergraduate degree in 1 year in Basel. And that I thought would be a good way into a Swiss sort of employment, because people like ETH and Zurich, they said, yeah, sure, you can study architecture here. You can start in the first year and do 6 years. I was like, I've just done 4 years. I'm not sure I want to do that.
Right.
And that's how I ended up in Switzerland. And then after working as an interior designer in a firm in Zurich for about a year and a half, we got this phone call from Richemont Real Estate saying, look, we're looking for architects to design a museum for IWC. I loved IWC anyway. My dad was into watches. I loved that brand.
Oh, really? Okay.
I walked past a retailer in Bournemouth that had IWC, and I always liked that kind of purist instrument watch look. So
Cool.
I just sort of absolutely jumped at it. And I worked with my boss at the time to work day and night to come up with a design concept for the museum. We presented it a few days later. It got accepted as a concept proposal. And then I built the museum there as a project manager and the boutique next to it in Schaffhausen back in 2005, 2006. And at that time, I realized IWC wanted to build a lot of shops around the world, but they had absolutely nobody that knew anything about architecture or project management in architecture. And then I wrote to the marketing director at the time, said, I think I could help you. And
Wow.
interviewed me, and they said yes. And that was the end of that.
Wow, that's amazing. So you just pitched yourself. That's great.
Yeah, I wrote a long letter. And interestingly, last week I spoke at he's now the gentleman who was the marketing director, then in the meantime was the CEO of Bon Mercier. And then he went to EFT Private Bank doing the marketing there. And last week I did the keynote at the Swiss Private Banking Day. And it just reminded me again, it's funny, this is the gentleman I actually applied to with my pitch letter back in the day.
Oh, that's amazing.
To Swiss private banking CEOs for half an hour about business in private banking. I'm thinking, wow.
Man, yeah, the road is a windy one, isn't it? That's really crazy. So who's sort of responsible for the store designs now? Do you still play a key role in that, just due to interest?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in store design, of course, but
Yeah.
I don't have to do it frontline anymore because we've got basically we have two gentlemen that used to work for the rendering agency that used to do visualization for me, now work for us full time. So they have learned over the years really well how to communicate with me, and I can pitch them an idea or give them a really horrible sketch, and they know what I
They
mean.
get it. Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
that's really worth a lot. And then I was lucky that during the time just before I got this job, we hired a gentleman who came from Puma store design, from Puma apparel,
Sure.
and he just developed into this fantastic store design talent and doing all the watches and wonders. So again, we talk a lot, but I could, thanks to him, I could pull out of that side of things quite quickly and focus on other areas of the job.
Yeah.
I don't think they would ever say that I leave them in peace, though, but at least I don't sit there anymore, like sort of micro directing stuff at screens and so on. So he's,
Yeah.
again, we have conversations, and he's really good at picking up what I'm thinking about. He's very good at coming up with ideas that I like. So it's it was really a win-win situation, and he's fantastic. So that's helped a lot.
Yeah. So, okay, so I've been a huge fan of IWC since 2007 when I first
Wow.
discovered the
Oh, thank
brand.
you. That's a long
Um,
time. That was a
yeah,
Da
and
Vinci year. I mean,
well, so and my first love, I was wearing it actually at Goodwood, which was the Portofino chronograph, and for whatever reason in 2007, I was just visually drawn to that watch. It looked expensive, it looked complicated, with the chronograph dial and such. I still own it, still love it, wear it all the time. I'm still just a mad chronograph fan.
could be to 3705. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this I'm obsessed with this one. I mean, this is IWC to me, like for me personally. Like I just
See, at least that's my watch rather than the Portofino Chrono from 2007.
yeah. No, fair enough. Fair enough. So but my question is you guys are sort of on your third store iteration from a visual standpoint since 2007 that I can think of, just using I mean, I'm based in San Diego, but just use Madison Avenue as an example. Like you had that big
It's a
storefront.
fourth generation. It's a fourth generation
Okay.
of standard boutique design. Yes.
Okay. So is there a distinct timeline for reiteration or for reconfigurations, or is it just on a not on a whim? I'm sure it's more thought out than that, but like what's the time like when would you come up with the next iteration of stores, would you guess?
Well, typically, I would say it's between 5 and 7 years.
Okay.
Sort of a generation shift, and it's always fluid because you'll always have. I find it very impressive sometimes to see that in fashion that certain brands will really like do a new concept and then switch their entire store network within 24 months or something. That for us, that's never going to be realistic. So you're always going to have 2 to 3 generations out there in the network at any given moment in time. I think you're more precise with the shop in shops and with the displays in multi-brand. I don't
Yeah.
think you leave more than 2 generations out there, typically speaking.
Yeah.
In stores, depending on where you are, it's always we try to do it sort of country by country, but do the main hubs at the same time. So it's probably like a 5 6 year rollout period, and then you start again basically. And when you've completed one concept in engineering, you start doing the next.
Yeah. Usually in fashion, I think that's usually correlated with like change in creative direction. If they get a new creative director, then they're like, well, I want to be known for me. So, let's do this. What do you find IWC is communicating about the watches via its architecture currently?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of main elements. I think one of the things we really of course, that we bring across is this sort of the engineering DNA within the brand signature
Sure.
being white, the spaces being nowadays, they're technical yet friendly and welcoming, with the right balance, I would say, between sort of the cold sort of engineering world, which is more lab-like, more black
Yeah.
and white, harder, and then a softer welcoming, especially in the lounges, where it goes more into storytelling, more into relationships, more into a bit of a warmer human touch, I would say, in terms of the color palette that we're using. The other thing we're definitely trying to do with our stores is be quite open and transparent and welcoming. So we're trying not to be sort of standoffish in terms of the threshold anxiety generation of our stores. We try to be good hosts and then offer everybody a comfortable setting, to explore the brand, whether you're just coming in to, have a browse around for a couple of minutes, or whether you want to sit down and have a long conversation and talk watches and have a coffee and come in, that's it. And then, of course, depending on which store you're in, we're adding many layers of storytelling. So if you've been to Zurich, or Dubai, or the Shanghai takeaway space, Paris, Champs-Élysées, they then have many, many layers of storytelling where we go a lot more into connecting with the factory or motorsport heritage storytelling or whatever it may be, store by store.
Yeah, that's right.
Every standard boutique, but in the bigger ones, you start to get into those kind of feature stories, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess that is the fourth. Now that you bring it up, the Zurich boutique I have been in, and yeah, I guess that would be the fourth iteration of the stores, I guess, right?
Well, actually, so when I started, when you think about sort of 2007,
okay,
that would have been a white concept that at the time, for example, was installed in the Time Dome, Tourneau, and Vegas, and boutiques like, the first Beverly Hills. There would have been what we call the white concept. It literally was white wallpaper, white back wall, and then it had these wire mesh frames with inserted wall showcases that you probably won't be able to remember this generation. Then I think it changed to the first generation that I designed, and that was round about 2008, I think. And it started in Singapore, in ION and in Heritage in Hong Kong. Um, Commonly, we call that the black concept. It had a back wall that had kind of a sort of a black offset grid kind of centerpiece, and then it used brown and cream wall paneling. Then it went to what we call the Evo concept, which was the Tom Ford inspired Makassar. That was when Tom Ford did Madison Avenue. I mean, it's long ago now.
Oh yeah, with the spiral staircase. Yeah.
Yeah, this was literally, I think, when I walked past the Tom Ford boutique in Madison Avenue and was blown away by the atmosphere of that space. And I think that's probably what inspired me to design it that way. And then it got an Art Deco element into that concept generation, because at the time we were doing the London Bond Street store, and that had Art Deco detailing. So we picked up some Art Deco elements and then sort of left it in the concept. And that's why it was kind of this Art Deco Makassar blend. So that was the 2012. That was the third generation. And then the fourth generation is what you see now in boutiques like Stuttgart and Paris and so on. This is something it's probably a year and a half old now, and it's still in early rollout, I'd say.
Yeah, sure.
Zurich and Madison and Dubai, they're all standalones. The flagships, they don't belong to any concept generation per se. They're really one-offs that we create for these spaces.
Right. Last year, I was able to tour the manufacturer, which was unbelievable. I had a wonderful day there in Schaffhausen, and what that was sort of your baby, right? Is designing the manufacturer. What sort of color can you add to that whole process, or what you wanted to like be certain was accomplished?
Yeah, I think something that struck me after having done the museum is that I always felt like, well, the shell of the museum was really quite timeless and sort of a high-end exhibition space, quite cold, but at least it survived a couple of concept generations. I did think that the content of some of what we did in the museum was too close to the marketing lingo of the day. Right? So I think the longevity of that wasn't anywhere close to what I thought it had to be. And I think it was good learning to see how quickly that starts dating. But obviously, when you spend a few million on a museum, you're not going to update that museum every 2 years. It just becomes financially not very viable. So when we started the factory, I think I was quite conscious that on the one hand, it has to match brand DNA and has to match sort of the color palette and the expression of IWC. But just bearing in mind that this building may be there for 100 years plus, it's not something you build for 5 years like a boutique. It's not an exhibition. So you have to be kind of away from the marketing expression of the day. You have to be a bit more timeless. You have to remove yourself a couple of levels from that sort of currency.
Sure.
So the question for the factory was really, how do we find something that represents the core DNA of IWC, but will stand the test of time? And this is really when, over, I think, 12 or 13 design concepts I did in the very beginning for what the packaging of this space is going to look like. And in the end, I really like this metaphor of the, classic modern exhibition pavilion, because these world exhibitions, they were always where countries showed off the best in engineering, in art, in skills, and it's just a national pride, right? And then in this pavilion architecture, you find something that is quite residential, and you find something that is very, very modern, but also quite human. It's not a code, it's not a Lloyd's banking insurance building in London. It's not a machine, right? It's not a Le Corbusian sort of.
It's very like Mies van der Rohe, World's
Fair.
Fair.
It's much more on that side, where it uses sort of high-end materials, modern open spaces, but a human feel to it. And that's something I really liked. And then we worked out over time, okay, let's actually do 2 color schemes throughout. Let's have this very controlled black, white, and silver production area, but then let's use the wood and the carpets and the warmer shades in the visitor reception and all around where visitors are walking, to just give that a bit more of a natural human touch, juxtaposing that against the sort of very machine controlled environment of production.
It's funny when you describe it like that, black, white with some wood. You just described my house, and I didn't even realize that, which is really funny.
Black, white, and a bit of wood, but it needs a bit of
some warmth.
I was always tempted traditionally to just go black and white, just go very male, very engineered, and over time, you learn to appreciate that sort of both a little bit of a feminine touch. I think that's why when. Did you come to Watches and Wonders? I can't remember. Did you see that?
No, unfortunately, I've never been. The timing has never worked out, unfortunately.
Yeah, so Watches and Wonders is it's the same thing. We did this year was all about the engineering and the Formula One movie. So again, it would have been super obvious to just make it all black, white, grid, hard. But then we always make the point of saying, okay, where you have the welcoming spaces, the CX lounges for end customers, the offices, and all the rest of it, let's make that a lot softer, a lot more natural shapes, a lot more feminine in a way than the main exhibition space, and just balancing it off a little bit, because otherwise it's very tempting to just go.
Yeah, totally.
It becomes this kind of car garage. And yeah.
Sure.
So this is the balance we try to strike, also in terms of just for our colleagues, balancing the work environment, which is so controlled in many ways, with sort of the building and the vistas and the way the canteen works, the restaurant upstairs with the outdoor spaces, and everything being geared and looking out at nature, right? And we went to really great lengths of managing the sunlight in the building, so we don't have to have the blinds down all the time. We don't have to, if you have these glass buildings in watchmaking, you know them very well. All that happens is they have permanent sun protection down, and you work in a dark box that is hot, right? So creating the roof overhangs and the solar glazing and the way that everything is done and designed, it really makes sure that we can keep those vistas open most of the day, most of the time, and really let people connect with the greenery around it, which is, that nice balance.
Yeah, it's super beautiful. Great area, obviously. I mean, it's just so beautiful in that part of Switzerland. I love it. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. What other CEO within Richemont would you say you're closest to?
Well, in terms of
like friendship, like would you are you and Wilhelm close, for example, or something like that?
I have a great working relationship with all of my colleagues, especially in the Watches Maisons and across Richemont generally.
Yeah.
As you know, we, in terms of communication, really like to focus on IWC.
Yeah.
No, I've had great relationships over time, with various colleagues. I would say that, in a sense, sometimes I think the sort of the outplaced maisons, there's always a connection there, because we're, when you look at Peter Millar in North Carolina, when you look at G4 in LA, when you look at Lange & Söhne in Glashütte in Germany, the Purdy in London, Dunhill in London, there's a bit of a sort of an outlier kind of sort of connection, I think. And for me, it's always been really interesting to understand businesses that are radically different to ours. When you think about Purdy as a rifle maker, that's making shooting guns, it's a completely different customer-based business setup. And I always find that fascinating. And the same for Peter Millar and G4, just understanding sort of the logic of the seasons and the workings of apparel, and which is a bit more on the fashion side. Of course, not fashion, but it's more in that direction that I always find really inspiring to just, see other business models like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. G4s, I interviewed with them years ago.
Did you?
Actually. Yeah. So anyway, when you're focusing on an individual collection most years, Angenour or Portuguese, how much focus is there on growing? Can you focus on last year's business as far as sales goes? I don't know how you sort of focus this year's performance and how it relates to the collection at hand, because a lot of business use LY as their comp numbers and their sales and such, right? So, but IWC is really kind of interesting. It's almost fashion-like in that you have this collection this year that you're focusing on. Obviously, one collection is not going to sell the same way as another collection because it's completely different, right? So, how do you monitor sales and take those aspects into account when you're looking at the performance of the company? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think, what I would say is that, we really are in the middle of a transition period when it comes to how we play this. And I would say, yes, when you're coming from an almost 100% wholesale base, 10 years back, 8 years back,
sure,
then this idea of presenting the new collection at the beginning of the sort of the watch year, and then obviously selling that into your wholesale partners and supporting it, there was this focus on newness. And I think IWC was in particular focusing, as you say, on the single collection, and then building this kind of universe around it that would really bring that collection to life. Quite heavy on the storytelling, heavy on content creation, events, live exhibitions, etc. All those things around it that would really bring color to, like you say, Da Vinci, back in
Right.
2007. So there was
Yeah.
a palazzo, then there was a play with some Hollywood actors, some of which we don't talk about anymore. But that was all going on. 2010 Portuguesa, there was a film with Jean Reno, for example, about navigation, and that would lead into navigation exercises that we could play on boats all around the world with customers, where they could do astro navigation with a sextant. And you have this kind of this sort of global storytelling that starts with the main campaign and then hopefully can be broken down into activities in every single market, every single retailer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as you're transitioning to a more balanced business model between wholesale and retail, that single focus is shifting quite a bit, because if you're a retailer as a brand, then you want sort of much more even support to your different collections. And you're right, different collections are very different. They're different in terms of their customer base. They're different geographically. They're different in terms of people's preferences for size, sports, classic, etc.
Sure.
And ultimately, you're running the company internationally on 5 engines, and
Yeah.
the focal points that we might have, broadly speaking, in the Western world, Europe and the US, it's not necessarily the same at all as it is maybe in parts of Asia and China and the Middle East, etc. So we have to be more balanced nowadays, and there are just certain messages which work particularly well in one market and that don't work as well in another, right? So, and today, when I look at, yes, you could say we have that one collection, but when you look at Watches and Wonders this year, it was fairly balanced out of pilots and engineer. Yes, it was more of a sports focus, the talking piece being the engineer watches, but then on the back of that, you had a whole host of pilots novelties within Apex GP Formula One for the movie, and pilots around that, complicated watches and pilots. And when you see the year rolling out now, we had a PR start on engineer. Now we're going in the focused media campaign for the F1 movie launched in June.
Sure.
On it will evolve into something else again when we go into the second half of the year. So I think it's really a transition from what you're describing, which is this sort of single focus, here it is, big bang, and then forget about it next year, put in extreme.
Sure.
Which is a lot more continuous and a lot more balanced, with still highlights, focal points, of course, but more balanced in terms of its support.
Yeah. No, that's great. No, I appreciate it. I gotten to know Christian Knoop a little bit, and I love him so much. And we talked design and kind of leading up in like prototypes and things like that. And I know you wear a lot of these new watches in advance, and I'm kind of curious, do you have an open dialogue while wearing it with someone like Christian, or is it kind of I wear it for 3 weeks and let's reconvene?
No, not. I mean, often we don't have 3 weeks.
Okay.
Somebody puts a watch on my desk. They give me 5 hours, which I extend to 48. It's never that.
Oh, really?
Endless amounts of time to review prototypes. For me, the thing is just I've learned over the years. It's not always, unless the watch is. Sometimes it's just perfect, and most of when you know.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's not really that helpful to just be in the product strategy room under the control light conditions and give the final verdict on every detail of the watch. It really helps to just take it into different light conditions, morning, midday, afternoon, nighttime at home, and just to see what the watch does. And something I had to really learn the hard way in this job is that these products, they behave completely different compared to architecture, because the design control in architecture is really quite complete. Yes, there's lighting and all the rest of it, but you can really visualize the end result of an architectural space almost to perfection, and then the last couple of tweaks are really easily done on site. Like, everybody knows that from finishing a job, and then the paint is not quite right, the lighting is not quite right. It can always be done in quite a last-minute snagging process. And the movie industry being maybe the most extreme example, and they can put entire sets together and really do it all last minute, and then do the rest in color grading and in post. And even if it's fully built, the control over these environments is sensational. In watches, and probably also in jewelry, it doesn't work like that at all. Right? The computer rendering is really a very, very rough approximation of the result you're going to get. And it's
Oh,
only
really?
in the metal with a finished dial, finished case, finished glass. The sapphire is absolutely crucial. If you don't have the anti-reflective coating on the sapphire, it changes everything. And
Yeah,
every
definitely.
single element influences the effect that other elements have in a watch. And you really have to start wearing, feeling, experiencing these products. And then the reaction you have to a watch is purely emotional, right? This is like, I know this sounds really bizarre, but I really fundamentally believe you can't like a watch off a photograph or on
No.
somebody else's wrist. You can like what you see in that picture, but it doesn't mean that you like it. I mean, there's many watches in the industry that I like a lot. I hate them on my wrist.
100%.
Hate them.
Yeah.
And I think you like the response there. It's very different from many other product categories. It's really something that you have to put on your own skin, experience in your actual real life, and then
Hmm.
respond to how it makes you feel and what bothers you or doesn't. And that's something I still always like about the Ingenieur Automatic 40 we launched a couple of years ago, is that I've been wearing this thing like for absolutely ever now. It feels like forever. It's a watch I've worn the most continuously out of any watch in IWC, and I still can't find anything wrong with it.
Well, that's interesting. You're stealing questions from me already in the future, which is great. That's what these things are all about. Like just pull the cord and go kind of thing. What dial configuration do you have? The black dial, right?
I wear the black dial, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I've seen it in your Instagram. Yeah, yeah,
most
yeah.
of the time. Yeah.
So classic, timeless.
And it's just
Yeah.
that, this is just something because that dial and the layout of the Ingenieur is really not designed to work across the table 3 meters distance. It's not a show-off watch like that.
Right.
It's really something that develops all of its impact and its beauty at the wearer's viewing distance of 40, 50 centimeters.
Totally.
And then you have, I think the right balance of light and shade, of light and dark, of the grid pattern dial that beautifully, comes to play in the lights. You've got all these little chrome accents you have on the silver, the date window, all of those elements. They
Yeah.
really work beautifully, without like sometimes it's the same for anything on TV. If things are designed to work at great distances,
Hmm.
they're mostly completely exaggerated, when you have them at close distance. And you see this I had to learn this the hard way for Formula One cars as well. All the branding, all the color effects have to be totally over the top. It's like
Yeah.
TV makeup, right? It's like you see
Oh,
people in
sure.
real life,
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good comparison. Yeah.
In the same, we had to make our logos so much fatter to go on cars so they work and look natural when you see them on TV. When we started ski resort branding, and you have to look at stuff from chairlifts and gondola, you have to exaggerate everything, like really to make it look good from a distance.
Right.
But then obviously, from short distance, it looks all wrong. Right? And watches are exactly like that. You see some watches that have a really good long distance impact and you immediately recognize what it is.
Yeah.
I can't stand them at 30 centimeters because everything is like totally over the top and off balance and really like weird, like graphic design wise, really not balanced at all. But it's designed for long distance recognizability, and that's fair enough. That's what they're trying to do.
Sure.
I think the Ingenieur is really, these dials, they really are designed for the wearer to be enjoyed, and they don't look wrong at 40 centimeters.
Right. Yeah, no, that's completely fair. I couldn't agree more. I think there's a really good it's very analogous to cars. Like there's a lot of cars that look great on the road, but me personally, I get behind the wheel and they just don't resonate with me. Or vice versa. You never thought you'd like it and you're like, "Oh my God, this thing's incredible," you know?
Yeah, that's horrible when that happens, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
When you really don't like a car and then you love driving it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh.
I don't know. I'm not no shade at BMW, but it can be that way sometimes. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just not a great look, but drives well. You guys have worked with some of the most incredible people in the world. Obviously, with Lewis, you mentioned before, Tom Brady. Eileen Gu. I mean, what more can you say about her? I mean, she's
Mm,
incredible. She's so poised, professional,
yeah.
but young. She's so young, but so accomplished in skiing. Um,
Not just skiing. It's
oh, sure. Oh, yeah. And fashion.
very versatile.
Yeah, no, 100%. What's sort of the approach and who you look for to work with, and how do you sort of measure? God forbid I use the word performance as far as like an ROI is concerned, but like, how do you sort of measure the success of that kind of relationship?
Well, I think, to your point, I think this whole idea of association marketing is something that's probably as old as the idea of luxury goods. Right? It used to
Sure.
be, literally back in the day, what sort of kings and queens of the age wore that was done
Yeah.
by a special craftsperson, and that used to then, in the 16th, 17th century, at some point, sort of magazines started to appear, which were printed versions of what royalty wore at the courts across Europe, and that sort of determined the fashion in hairstyle, in shoes, in clothes, and so on. And then, sooner or later, it became the Hollywood actor and actors, the Hollywood stars, in the early 20th century, and then it went on to sports and athletes and social media personalities and all the rest of it, and became a lot broader. I think there's a lot more categories now than there used to be in terms of the people we're looking up to and the people that are the real life influencers. And today, like especially during the COVID period and just after, it's actually really striking to see that sort of major taste making power
Mm.
is really down to quite a small circle of people.
Hmm.
Name them all, and if they wear something, it goes through the roof afterwards. It really is sometimes that straightforward. There's
Yeah.
certain pop stars we all know that if they pick out one brand, I mean, the next day it'll be like.
Yeah.
And of course, watches don't quite work like that, but we're not immune to that effect either. So I think
Sure.
you have to ultimately balance somebody who represents the values of the brand with somebody
Hmm.
who has a certain taste making potential and has the reach to actually physically influence people. And that dynamic is changing all of the time.
Yeah.
It's I think we all witnessed during COVID how rapidly the way we consume that style information changed, and also the people that suddenly were telling us what to wear. It
Right.
was a crazy time when you think back to, I think it was Joe Biden's inauguration, I think, and there was Barack Obama's nephew or something in the back wearing a certain pair of Nike Dunks.
Really?
Yeah, and the internet was the first time I remember that happened. Like the entire internet exploded. And it was all about this inauguration in Washington, D.C., but it wasn't about the political side of things or who was there or what was said. It was solely about what people were wearing. And all of a sudden, this became this huge thing that every like ATP tournament and every golf tournament became this like, oh, who's wearing what? And then basketball, front row, courtside.
Sure. Yeah.
What watches did we spot? And then that went all like, it was all about DJ Khaled.
Yeah.
and this is not that long ago. This was like 21, 22 when that really, really kicked off.
Yeah.
And now, yeah, there is this idea of watch spotting and sneaker spotting and who's wearing what. And this is an element of your marketing reality, whether you like it or not. And today,
Yeah.
when we see just before Watches and Wonders, Ed Sheeran picking up that Ingenieur ceramic and
Yep.
wearing it on the Today Show, I think on Saturday Night Live, I think it was. And to one of those games, yeah, it's a fact of life nowadays. It's a fact of that taste making process. I'd say.
Sure. Are you a sneakerhead at all? What's your shoe of choice every day?
I would not call myself that. I think we are limited. I mean, yes, I'm probably a bit shoe mad, but that goes way beyond sneakers. I think yes, I've always had. This comes from my mum, by the way. She was a shoe shopaholic, always has been.
Okay. Yeah.
I've kind of inherited that a little bit in a sense. So yeah, way too many shoes, but not just sneakers. No, it's across the board these days.
What do you wear most days?
What do I wear? I wear a lot of Santoni.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
Because of
sure.
that relationship and because they're incredibly well made,
Yeah.
need minimum maintenance, and I've always found them incredibly comfortable.
Yeah.
Shoe you basically never have to reheel, resole. They can always be restored, and like our watches, I like that it's not a throwaway kind of thing. It makes me quite sad with some of the sneakers as well.
Yeah.
When you think about some of the stuff, including your running shoes, they last a few months and then you have to replace them. And it's yeah, I like things that last. So
Yeah.
it's
I
it's a
just
better way of consuming, I think.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I try to do that with Standard H. Most of the fabrics I use are pretty substantial and that kind of thing for that reason that could sort of stand the test of time. Um, Many brands use the 28th on their date wheel for marketing collateral. You guys very often use 25.
Hmm.
Now I know Along Zona does it for their reasons, but what's the IWC reason?
I think it's the same reason, but then again, I don't think we will ever agree on the actual reason
Okay.
for it. And I've heard many different stories. The one that I'm going with, because it sounds the most plausible to me, is that indeed it was the Lange Zone launch date, with the press conference being on the 24th of October, as far as I
Right.
remember, and then the release date of the photographs being the 25th of October. And that being Günther Blümlein in charge of IWC and Lange Zone having the date set to 25,
Right.
and us sort of just sticking with that. There's other people who say it's just because you have the perfect symmetry between the 2 and the 5, and they're kind of being mirror image of each other, and it just looks the
Right.
most balanced in the date wheel. I don't think we'll ever know.
Yeah. Okay.
I find that Alanger and Söhne launch story really quite charming. So I'm going with that one, but I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I couldn't agree more. I was just always curious about these silly details. Um,
I mean, the fact that on some of the annual calendars and stuff, we've actually seen the month October being set as well
sure.
pushes me a bit more in that Lange and Söhne direction.
Yeah, no, that's fair. As CEO or just as a person, is there anything that you like look back on your life and think like I wish I learned this sooner?
Most things. Tomorrow's lottery number.
Right, right. Sure. Yeah, yeah.
But most things, of course,
Okay.
learning mostly from mistakes is always painful. And yes, you always go, duh. It all seems so obvious. Hindsight is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. What's something that George Kern maybe taught you that you say you use often?
I think generally, like what he brought to the table was the power of storytelling. It was
Mm.
the power of going beyond the facts of things, as you like. And it's always been like in our approach since then. And I think you had probably before that era, you had a much more factual approach to watches when you think about how the big pilot was launched, how the perpetual calendar was launched. It was really product centric and product first and product only, which is great. But at the same time, it's lacking a bit of feeling, emotion, excitement. Can be quite rational, right? And I think there was this project back in 2001, 2002, probably at the big pilot launch when we sent the Ju-52 aircraft around the world, and it's again going back to those days. It resulted in basically a photo book and in a DVD, which was a DVD even or CD-ROM,
Right. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that got mailed out to people, right? And that was the storytelling, and there were some model aircraft. And when you fast forward, you look at how this media consumption has evolved as well. I always like to look back, and that's actually on YouTube. Our 2006 pilot's launch video with John Markovich. It was 9 minutes and 30 seconds long, or something like that.
Wow.
And again, that was mailed out to people on DVDs and the like, back in the day.
Wow.
It's crazy when you compare this to then what you're able to do, Spitfire 2019, when you can tell this entire story, start to finish on all media channels, being interactive as well, gamified, being able to do all those things and having events all around the world. It's changed completely. But I think what I took away from George's approach was clearly this power of creating a universe that you can walk into and that you can experience.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at store design as well, I would argue that we were one of the first ones, if not the first one in the watch industry that really leveraged the idea of building that story, the emotion around the product.
Right. That's great. Chris, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast for me.
Yeah, likewise.
What's next for you travel wise? I know you get around the globe quite a bit.
It's South Africa next week, and then
Oh wow.
then we'll go into the hot launch phase of Formula One movies. So I think the London premiere is on the 24th, and then our IWC pre-premiere, I think the 26th of June. So there'll be a lot of the F1 movie promo activity for the rest of June.
Oh man.
Yeah, and then off to Norway on holiday, early July.
Oh, Norway. Is that somewhere? I'm my background is Norwegian. What part of Norway do you go to?
Yeah, so we're flying into Bergen and then making our way up to the place that I always mispronounce, which is Alesund, but it's pronounced. You know this better than me. I don't know what.
I no, don't. Yeah, don't make that mistake. I probably don't.
It's the cruise terminal
Sure.
further up north, and sort of we're doing a few hotel stops and experiences along the way with the kids. So we're
Oh,
hoping for that
incredible.
Norwegian summer window of maybe being more than 20 degrees centigrade and maybe not raining all the time, which would be nice.
Yeah, totally. Wait, how old are your kids now?
Well, they are now 15, 13, and just about to turn 8.
Oh, wow. Okay. I just became a father 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
I thank you. Yeah, I don't know if she's been the best. So there's no way you heard her. She's silent. She's amazing.
That's nature's way of fooling people into having another one.
Right, right.
Give you a first one where you say, hey, I can carry on with my life. This is all fine. She
Yeah.
sleeps all the time. She's good as gold. She eats all right. And then you have a second one, and then all hell breaks loose.
My wife and I were talking about that literally yesterday afternoon. That's really funny you should say that. Oh, I forgot to ask you, Grail car. Do you have a Grail car?
Yeah, quite a few actually.
Yeah, join the club.
Quite a few. So the one that I've driven, and there's one that I have it might not be the greatest car on earth, but I have a very special relationship with the Mercedes-AMG CLK Black Series from
Oh,
2006.
Yeah.
Reason for that is my first business trip that IWC sent me on, which was on day 2 of my job, was to go and build a boutique in Abu Dhabi in Marina Mall. And in that same mall, there was Emirates Motor Cars. And back in the day, they had basically every Mercedes going in their showroom, including like a McLaren SLR and all this stuff. And they had this Black Series in silver with the multi-spoke rims on display, back seats taken out, the AMG embossed carbon fiber door cards. And I just sat in that car and just thought, wow, this is it. Like the balance between understatement and absolute performance. But I had never driven it, so I had no idea. I just always admired this car. And I really think that it's quite a timeless silhouette. It's hugely underappreciated. So still value-wise, you can pick one up for 140, 150,000 or something like that. It's nowhere near the 190 Evo 2s or anything like that. And then I was lucky enough a couple of years ago, I drove one at the Mercedes test track in Immending and in absolutely soaking wet conditions. And this thing is unbelievable. It's just like a ballet dancer. It just, the way it speaks to you, you can feel everything through that steering wheel, and it's so direct and so analog and so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's, sometimes when you meet your heroes or you finally get to drive something you really like, you're like hugely disappointed.
Right.
This car, it just continued to amaze me all the time when I was driving it. I still haven't got it, but one day.
Well, that's the best. I'm so glad you weren't let down, as we were talking about, because it's nervous, there's a nervousness.
For sure. And as you've mentioned before, there's some cars where you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, right. Well, Chris, again, thank you for your time. I'm grateful for this conversation. Can't wait to share it.
Thank you so much for making the time. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care. Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard H podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show, as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.